Everybody ready? Good morning, everyone. Melanie, are we ready to begin the meeting?
Yes, Madam Chair, we are ready.
Okay, so it's 9:01, and I'll call the January 9th, 2026 meeting of SDCERS Board of Administration to order. Melanie, do we have a quorum?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Melanie. Before moving on to Section 3, public comment, I would like to recognize Melanie Peters, SDCERS Compliance Program Coordinator and Senior Paralegal, who is helping us run the meeting today while Rosie is away taking care of family. So thank you so much, Melanie. And I would also like to recognize and thank Johnny Tran for his work coordinating the agenda process for our January meetings. So thank you to you both. So let's move on to Section 3, public comment. Do we have any public comments?
Yes, Madam Chair, Mr. Jorge Ruiz will be speaking. However, he'd like to reserve his time for his disability item.
Okay, perfect. So moving on to Section 4, approval of the consent agenda items. We have service retirements, drop entries, drop retirements, training, and the board agenda calendar. Before I call a motion for approval, would any of the board members like to pull any of those items? Okay. Sure. Oh, put your mic on.
Where are we on scheduling our April retreat?
So our regularly scheduled board secretary will be back on January 15th, which is in about a week. And at that point, she's going to come out and reach out to the board members to find the best possible time for all board members. And we're looking for an April timeframe, but also being cognizant that that may be spring break for some families, and that we're trying to find a good date in that timeframe.
Okay, so hearing no request to pull the consent agenda items, would any board member like to speak to any of those items? Nope. Okay, well, let's have a vote. Okay, we already have a motion by Paul. Do we have a second? And a second by Louis. Maggie? Now we can vote. Chris?
I'm a yes.
Okay.
My screen's not where it needs to be. Thanks for voting for me.
No, I didn't.
Okay, all good.
There we go.
Okay, perfect.
And with all votes in, the motion passes 9-0.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So this finishes our consent agenda items, and now we'll move to Section 5, Business and Operations. We have 1 action item and 3 information items on this agenda. Starting with our action item, recommendation to amend the board process on election of board president and appointment of the vice president and the board officers and secretary charter pertaining to terms of office, as brought forth by SDCERS board member Chris Brewster. So Chris, would you like to open this item?
Yes, thank you very much. We talked about this briefly at the last meeting, and I agreed to bring this forward to this forum because it impacts the entire board. And you have a couple-page report that I submitted to you. Just a little bit of background from my perspective. I have over the years had the opportunity to serve as president of several organizations, the California Surf Lifesaving Association, United States Lifesaving Association, America's region of the International Lifesaving Federation for a number of years, and all had a pretty good-sized board of directors. And what I found, and maybe this is just my personal experience, is that there was a learning curve. It took a while to be good at it. And I will say that those organizations, while they had very large board of directors, some of them up to 35, certainly did not have a $13 billion trust fund. They all wished they would have, but they did not. Or anything close to the complexities that we deal with here in terms of various legislation and so on. So yeah, there was a learning curve there, and so when I came here to SDCERS, I was kind of surprised that we sort of cycle through our leaders fairly quickly in what seemed to me to be an almost ceremonial process. We do have an excellent staff, and we also have a separation of responsibilities in which we ultimately are the ones who are responsible for whatever happens here. And so it's my view that we would benefit by leadership that gets in and stays there for a while, gets their sea legs, so to speak, and is better positioned to lead us, but understanding that there may be concerns about the idea of, well, what happens if we're trapped with a person in that position that we'd be uncomfortable with. I put this together, this proposal together in such a way that every year we would have the opportunity to make a change. So I won't go further because I think this is reasonably well laid out in the memo I provided, and really it's just obviously the pleasure of the board. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Greg, did you have any comments?
Certainly. As mentioned before, there's a lot of different ways we can structure our governance structure. I believe our current board president, vice president process was really born out of the pension crisis. And I agree with Chris on the points he's making that having continuity of leadership, there's a very strong argument for that. The process Chris has laid out makes sense. I think it would serve the board well, and it really has to do with the preference of the board. And I would certainly support his amendments. I think that we'd be well served with that.
Thank you, Greg. Are there any comments from the board? No? Okay. Well, hearing no comments, may I have a motion and a second. Oh, you have comments?
Lisa Maria, I just wanted to mention one side issue that is in these amendments, just for transparency. So, excuse me, because it's kind of unrelated to what we're talking about, but I just want everybody to know what they would be voting on. There's that issue about the conflict that you can't have two.
Oh, you want me to address that?
Yeah, please.
So written in the current board process, it talks about we have different types of board members. We have board members that are independent members of our community. We have board members that are elected by the members, and we have a board member that is appointed by the mayor. And there is a special rule that says 2 elected members can not be president and vice president at the same time. And again, I think that goes back to the crisis, the pension crisis in the early 2000s, when you had 2 elected members that had to recuse themselves. And had they been president and vice president, then that could have been just a small governance problem. And since I've been here 8 years, we have never ever come close to having that being an issue. And so Chris's recommendation is actually to strike that language, and I support that also.
Yeah, just to add to what Greg was saying, there was a dark time for this organization in the 2000s where some members were indicted by the district attorney's office and whatever, and there was a view at that time, or an allegation, that an elected member who could potentially benefit by a decision here should not be able to vote at all. And so that was the issue. And then I think subsequently the Attorney General came out with an opinion, I think, and maybe there was some state law change that essentially negated all that. So the need for this paragraph is not there anymore.
Yeah, one consideration might be appropriate to discuss here as well. I'm not particularly in favor of this particular proposed amendment, and the reason for that is we've got a small, relatively small, intimate board. The way we've got this arranged right now is we've got a vice president that sits in on all of the preparatory meetings that Greg and Lisa Marie prepare. So in essence, we've got a 2-year time lap for the president, 2-year time lap for the vice president. So this is about a 4-year learning period, which is consideration. I think that's adequate for people moving into that presidential position. The other thing that you might want to consider is that by having this 2-year rotation period, it provides everybody a chance to partake in this kind of a leadership position, and I think that's very cohesive for the board. Without that, I think we'd lose some not continuity necessarily, but certainly some camaraderie-ship. And I think that's very important for this board, which is very, I think, at least certainly from my experience, has been very collaborative and proactive working together.
Chris, you want to comment on that?
I do respect what Paul's saying. I guess it's a question of whether there's a preference for just sort of rotating leadership in which the current leader doesn't really get deep into the weeds of helping in that leadership responsibility, or it's preferred that we have someone who is a bit more hands-on.
And your proposal still allows for that rotation to occur if the board so decides. Is that correct?
Well, there's definitely a relief valve, right? If at any time somebody feels that they would do a better job, they're welcome to step up. And if the board feels that it's time for a change sooner than the 4 years or whatever, that can happen any time in the cycle.
Okay. Are there any other comments? No. Okay. Greg, you have any further comments? Okay. Well, let's do I have a motion.
Oh, so it's my motion, right?
So have a second. Okay. So let's vote.
And the motion passes 5-4.
Okay. Thank you, Melanie. So in accordance with our newly revised rules, please note that you may express interest in assuming the role of board president by submitting a letter and resume or statement of relevant professional governance experience to the CEO no later than the second Friday in February. Okay, so we'll now move to the business operation information item, financial update, presentations for the city, the port, and the airport.
Lisa Marie, could I pause for a second?
Sure.
I'm sorry. The municipal code has a provision that says in order for the board to take action, it needs 7 affirmative votes.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's not that hard when we have all full board members, but given that we only have 9, even though this passes a majority, there could be a concern with passing the change to the 2 documents that you just made in a 5-4 vote.
So what do you recommend?
Well, I don't think it passes.
Okay.
So you could either continue to discuss it and to gain those votes. That's my suggestion.
Okay. Are there any comments from the voters that voted against it? Or would you like to express your concerns and then Chris can further elaborate, or we can just move on?
I'll comment briefly. I don't feel strongly on it one way or the other. I just really don't see a need for it. And I do agree with Paul. I think moving it around, giving everybody the opportunity is a good thing for the board. But yeah, I don't feel strongly one way or the other.
Okay. Any other comments?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I just think that it seems to be working well now, and the opportunities there for other members as well. So I feel the same way.
Yep, I agree with what both Lou and Kent said, and also with what Paul said as far as achieving that domain knowledge. How it's structured now is also important.
All right. So Lisa Marie and Chris is a parliamentarian, and so is Johnny, but I believe we try to follow Robert's Rules of Order just to help us vote and do motions. So in this case, we can't keep trying to do it over and over again unless somebody who voted no wants to make a motion.
Oh, I see.
Then you could vote on it again. Other than that, the motion fails and you move on with the agenda.
Okay, well, I was just following Johnny's
Oh, thank you.
comments,
Appreciate that guidance, Greg.
so we'll just move on. Go
Except, can I just make one suggestion? That cleanup language we were talking about, with two people being able to, two elected members being able to serve, may I put that forward as just a separate motion, which is what we talked about, that right now it says composition of Board of Administration. The board is comprised of the following categories of board members: 7 board members appointed by the mayor, 5 board members are elected by the membership or retirees, and 1 city management employee designated by the mayor. To avoid circumstances where the board president and vice president must be recused, these positions may not be concurrently held by elected members. So there's just cleanup language separate from this entire other issue. So may I make a motion then to strike from the board process on election of board president and appointment of vice president, Section 3.
Johnny, can he do that?
Yes.
Okay.
He needs a second, though.
Do you have a second?
Motion to strike Section 3 from the board process on election of board president and appointment of vice president. Of president? Wait a minute.
And while she's working on that, thanks for the consideration of the concept.
Johnny, while she enters that, just to clarify, the basis of the rule was to avoid a situation where the president and the vice president would both have to recuse, but based on the current state of the law, we wouldn't need to recuse in that situation.
Not necessarily. I think it depends on the circumstance. My recollection is SDCERS was embroiled in purchase of service litigation against quite a few members, and what happened was a lack of leadership because of recusals, because those decisions would affect them personally in possibly a unique way. And so the exception, I guess I want to state the black letter law, the clear law is, the Supreme Court said a board member like SDCERS board members can vote on an item if it affects everyone equally. You can vote on a COLA because every board member gets a COLA the same. But if the benefit is unique to you, Like if you got a bigger COLA because of who you are, then you would have a conflict. And so that rule was put in place in this policy to address that situation, I think, in the purchase of service litigation. And I think it was unique to that, and we haven't seen it since. So it's been 10 years since. So I think the policy change is reasonable, but there was a reason for it. And if the issue should come up again, then we can deal with it on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Then once you're ready, I'll second that.
Okay.
It's ready for a motion in a second. We are ready to vote. And the motion passes 9-0.
Great, thank you, Melanie. So Greg, can you introduce our first presenter?
Yes. Thank you, Lisa Marie. Every year about this time, we invite our 3 plan sponsors, the City of San Diego, the Unified Port District, and the San Diego County Airport Authority, to come just share information with us on their financial condition. And this is really part of funding the plan appropriately. We just really like to hear from them about how their operations are doing. And we had a really good suggestion last year from Christiana. She says, Greg, why don't you provide some prompts to the 3 plan sponsors with regards to some of the things that are important to SDCERS, but what we're thinking about. So I asked these following 3 prompts of all 3 plan sponsors. What is the city's short-term economic outlook, and how could it impact the city's ability to fund its ADC? What is the city's midterm operational outlook on significant operational development plans, which may impact SDCERS membership levels? And are SDCERS services meeting your needs, and are there any changes to SDCERS levels or services provided? And I apologize, I used the word city in the very first prompt, but the airport was mentioned in his specific prompts and the port in their specific prompts, so my error in reading that. So with that, it is my pleasure to start with Scott Brickner, the Vice President and CFO for the airport. Thank you, Scott, for coming.
Good morning, thank you. I'm just glad I don't have to do the city, because I wouldn't know what to say. Good morning, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm going to give a concise update on several areas: our new T1 milestone, our audited financial performance, current operational growth, pension funding and plan design, and our ongoing relationship with the SDCERS staff. Hopefully you've all had a chance to come out and see the new T1. In September, we completed the first phase of the largest and most complex development in our airport's history. We opened new T1 with 19 brand new gates, replacing the old 19 gates of our affectionately called Thunderdome old T1, which is now demolished. We opened a dedicated inbound on-airport roadway with dual-level arrival and departure curbs, which improves the traffic flow and eases curbside congestion. We have modern, expanded concession offerings that provide local and national flavors, enhancing the passenger experience, and a larger, more efficient terminal environment that positions us well for the future. This project's already delivering measurable benefits to travelers, the community, and our airline partners. The first phase is now complete. The final phase will be another 11 gates, and that will open in 2028. We recently completed our audited fiscal year 25 financial results. It was a strong fiscal year. We had 25 million annual passengers. Operating revenues grew by 8.6% to $434 million. Operating income rose from $85 million to $104 million, and net position increased by 11% to $1.4 billion. We also completed our debt financing for new T1 in 2025, benefiting from strong senior lien credit ratings. Fitch rates us AA- and Moody's rates us AA3. For the first 6 months of the fiscal year, we continued to see notable growth from our two largest carriers, Southwest and Alaska. Southwest has the most passengers coming in and out of San Diego, and Alaska has the most nonstop destinations. We're also benefiting from strength in several international routes. We added Amsterdam and Panama in the last year, so two exciting destinations there. And we have 87 nonstop destinations with 11 that are international. And overall, we expect moderate, steady growth over the foreseeable future. Shifting to pension funding, the authority maintains a board policy target of having 90 to 95% funded ratio. And we have a long history of making excess contributions when that funding ratio falls below 95%. Based on the draft actuarial report on your board agenda today, our plan is 96% funded, which is exactly where we want to be. 2 years ago, we introduced a defined contribution option for unrepresented employees. And since then, 64% of new employees have gone into the SDCERS pension plan, and 36% have elected the defined contribution plan. This balanced split supports both employee choice and long-term management of our pension obligations. We continue to value our strong relationship with SDCERS. Your team is professional, responsive, collaborative across both routine activities and more complex requests. We had a very complex situation with our 218 Social Security issue that I won't go into the detail of, but your staff was really, really helpful with that. And as you can imagine, we remain very focused on the plan's performance, including how it compares to relevant benchmarks and peer pension systems. Transparency and strong performance are essential for maintaining the high funding standards our board's committed to. So thanks for this opportunity to speak with you this morning, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Just had a quick question. So you guys are not rated by S&P?
So back when, back during COVID, we were rated by S&P. We still are rated by S&P, although we don't ask for new ratings. The last, I think, 2 or 3 debt issuances we've done, we didn't ask for a rating from S&P, so they continue to rate us, but they don't really have a lot of the right information. So S&P took a pretty hard stance against airports during COVID, and particularly with San Diego Airport, we just very much disagreed with their approach. Thought we had a very strong case as to why they shouldn't downgrade us, and they did, along with the rest of the industry. So we made the decision at that point that we really only needed 2 ratings. We didn't need 3 going forward. You know how it is, though. You don't burn bridges, and people change, things change. And do we want a rating in the future from S&P? Maybe. They do still continue to rate us, but like I said, they don't really have the most recent information to be able to rate us as well as the other 2.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments? Greg, you want to move to the next presenter?
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you next January. All right. Next, we'd like to invite up the Port of San Diego. With us today is someone that we are very familiar with, but in a new role. We have Matt Vespi. He is now serving as the Chief Administrative Officer for the Port of San Diego. And with Matt, it's good to welcome back Tracy Largent. She is the CFO and Treasurer of the Port. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Financial status and talk about our relationship with SDCERS. So before we get into the numbers, I'd like to briefly ground the discussion into who we are as an organization. So the Port of San Diego is a self-sustaining special district of the state of California, and we're a public benefit corporation. Our mission is to promote commerce, fisheries, navigation, and environmental stewardship while managing the San Diego Bay and the tidelands on behalf of the people of the state. That context matters because, unlike many public agencies, we do not collect any tax. So all of our operations, capital investments, and long-term obligations, including our retirement benefits, are funded through revenues that we generate. So turning to fiscal year 26 through November, I'll walk through our operating revenues and expenses and capital spending at a high level. I'll start with revenues. Overall, year-to-date operating revenues are tracking slightly below expectations. The primary driver in real estate is reduced hotel bookings and cancellations, tied largely to lower federal government travel and a decline in international travel. Parking usage is also down, which is directly correlated to fewer large events during this time period. In maritime, revenues are below budget due to lower ocean line cargo volumes, fewer harbor excursions than anticipated, and some tenant vacancies. That said, there's several positive offsets that help mitigate these impacts. We're experiencing higher labor dockage at our terminals, unanticipated Navy-related revenue, higher cruise terminal facility fees, and 7 additional cruise calls this year that were not included in the budget. So when you look at real estate, parking, and maritime together, we currently expect those categories to come in about 1% below budget. So while 1% might sound small, for the port, that equates to $2.3 million that we need to solve within the current year's budget. Given our size and lean budgeting approach, we actively manage these variances throughout the year to avoid operating losses, which would erode our reserve funds. The remaining categories shown here are our Harbor Police Department revenue, which is a cost recovery for services provided to the airport, and miscellaneous revenue. Overall, our diversified revenue base across maritime, real estate, and tourism-related activities continues to provide stability, even though individual sectors experience fluctuations. Looking ahead to fiscal year 27, we expect real estate and parking revenues to remain relatively flat. However, we're anticipating a significant increase in our maritime revenue, driven by an expected 85% increase in our cruise ship calls. Specifically, we're projecting 63 Disney Homeport calls and 43 new Royal Caribbean calls. So this activity is expected to roughly double our maritime revenue for fiscal year 27, while also requiring additional operational and staffing resources to support the growth. So operating expenses through November remain well controlled and generally consistent with budget assumptions. We continue to closely monitor labor, maintenance, and contractual costs with an emphasis on sustaining service levels while maintaining fiscal discipline. On the expense side, we have year-to-date personnel savings of about $1 million, driven mainly by vacancies. Historically, the port operates with a structural level of vacancies. Our average has been about 62 over the past 5 years. Currently, we sit at 50, and we have budgeted for 35 vacancies. So these personnel savings are temporary, and we expect them to be gone by year-end due to higher than expected wages from the class and compensation study that we implemented this past October, in addition to the negotiations for our HPOA. These increases in personnel continue to be a major concern for the port, as with most public agencies. Capital expenditures year-to-date reflect the timing of major waterfront and infrastructure projects. As you would expect, capital spending is nonlinear throughout the year, but overall, we remain aligned with our capital plan and our long-term funding strategy. So when we look at the combined impact of our revenues and expenses, our change in net position remains relatively positive and consistent with recent trends. As of June 30th, 2025, our net position is $695,000. That's up $70 million from fiscal year 24 to 25. The port maintains a 6-month operating reserve, which is currently $88 million for fiscal year 26, along with various other set-asides for specific purposes, including the balanced capital plan, which allocates funding evenly across the 5 member cities. The financial stability is a key factor in our ability to meet our long-term obligations, including our commitments to SDCERS. And as you can see here, we have a solid track record. The trend here reinforces a broader message. The port has maintained a steady financial trajectory over time. Prudent financial management, conservative forecasting, and disciplined capital planning have allowed us to navigate economic cycles like COVID, while continuing to invest in the waterfront and our workforce. So to summarize our economic position from a midterm perspective, The port's operational outlook reflects measured strategic development rather than a rapid expansion. Major initiatives are largely capital and tenant driven, and we don't expect any significant growth in full-time staffing or SDCERS membership levels. However, changes to the port's pension plan that removed the 5-year waiting period for new employees has significantly increased our ADC at 1.2 million more than we had forecasted for fiscal year 27. Staffing decisions will continue to be driven by operational need, affordability, and long-term cost sustainability, including pension impacts. Now I'll pass to Matt to discuss SDCERS services and our needs going forward.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the introduction, Greg. I'm excited to be here in this new role with the Port. Part of the assignment with in this role is really serving as kind of the lead liaison between the Port and SDCERS. As a result, while new in the role and still really getting up to speed, I have the oversight of service levels, and I've got some early observations, but also taking feedback from staff within the Port. One thing that we'd like to work on or continue to work on is increasing the frequency of communication between SDCERS and staff at the Port. I know Natasha and her team have done a good job to try to move towards that, and I'd like to be an active participant in increasing that communication. Also, that's not just for the ongoing kind of standard communication and items that go back and forth between SDCERS and the Port, but also when issues or one-off items come up, we'd like to hear about those as soon as possible, and then work through those issues as expeditiously as possible. Another item that we'd like to kind of raise for consideration is a dedicated resource to support Port staff in planning for retirement. I think as a group, all of us here in the room recognize that the SDCERS is a complicated organization, or the benefits are complicated. There are many different benefit plans. I think that's a result of kind of local control, right? There's been a lot of opportunities to amend the plans, and as a result, there's a lot of different plans based on hire date, based on plan sponsor. There's some pretty significant differences between the city's benefit plans and the benefit plan for the structure of the benefit plans at the Port. So I think it would be helpful for staff at the Port to have a subject matter expert in the benefit plans of the Port. The third item here on the slide, not necessarily within the purview of the Board of Administration, but I want to put it out there anyways, and it's kind of happens to fall in line with a little bit of the discussion you guys had as your first item, is the Port, and I'll speak for Scott, but Airport, we don't have representation on the board. I think we can probably all think back as to why that is and how this structure came to be, and the Port and Airport separating from the city over a long period of time, but the Port doesn't have representation. We don't have an employee appointed or an employee elected to the board. So just something to put out there that's kind of big picture and long term for consideration. So with that, thank you for the time. We appreciate the opportunity to be here, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Greg, did you want to address the comments?
Oh, no. And again, Matt, I've enjoyed our relationship when you were serving our community through the city, and I really look forward to also working with you at the Port. And it's fascinating talking about how we serve our members. We run a pretty lean machine, and while we look at staffing levels, we're always flexing how we organize ourselves and what we do. And while the city is generally our largest client, that's not really how we look at our relationships. We look at our relationships by member, and every member is individually important. So I really appreciate the feedback on saying, is there something better we can do for the Port members? Because that's really important to us. And so I really appreciate you bringing that up today, and we're always looking at that, and as things grow and change, we'll definitely enter into those conversations about how do we best support the Port, because you're very important to us. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Greg,
Matt,
go ahead.
excuse me. First of all, I'm very happy for you that you're in a situation in which the budget climate isn't quite as challenging as with your former employer. But I'm glad you brought up the issue of the difference, in terms of the plans and the challenge of serving the port versus the city and the airport and so forth. And I think our staff does everything they can to address all those things, but it's super complex. And I'm wondering, has the port ever considered the possibility of using CalPERS, for example, instead of SDCERS for its pension system?
I think I'm probably a little too early in my time to respond to whether or not that's been considered, but we have not had any conversations about that.
The reason I bring it up is that I think that a lot of the legislation that impacts your members is different than the legislation that impacts city members, and that adds to the challenges. And a lot of that legislation is state legislation that doesn't apply to us. So it's just a question. We talked about it a little bit, or I brought that up a little bit yesterday. I don't know what the best answer is.
I do.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. Greg does.
So, and this is just information I have from the California pension community that CalPERS is an outstanding organization. They run all the state plans. They have a very, very big book of business, what they call contracting cities or contracting agencies, many of which are here in our San Diego community. The challenges is the in-depth personal level of service that you can achieve. And so they do have regional service centers where people can travel to get to meet with somebody in person if they want to. So that's one of the challenges when you look at changing your service providers is your level of service and your relationship with them. So there are probably some pros and cons to actually changing service providers, but that would be one thing that I would recommend that if we go down that road that the plan sponsors take a look at.
Yeah, I think, Chris, to your comment, I would also, the amount of complexity with SDCERS and the different plans, changing providers would just be a whole nother layer of, right? There's be that part of it too, and maybe perspective or basis or something. But I think there's a lot in that question, so.
Yeah, no, I don't have the answer. It's just, thank you.
Thank you.
But I think the key takeaway is, Greg, you're going to meet with Matt going forward to
Oh,
resolve some of the feedback.
We enjoy a very good relationship with the port. We do our best to meet quarterly to talk about operational issues and what's happening at our respective organizations. So this is in alignment with that. But what I really appreciate is the integrity of the port to come have that conversation directly with the board. Because we talk about this at a staff level, but I really appreciate the conversation at the board. So thank you for bringing that up.
Matt, quick question. Do you have any thoughts on representation on the board itself? You're talking about moving from 13 to 14 members, or somehow working your way in with the 7-5 relationship, or what are your thoughts on that?
It's not, my thoughts are not that well developed. It's
Okay.
really just about the fact that there isn't representation and there hasn't been historically.
Yeah.
But yeah, you go to an even number, or if you go port and airport, then you stay with an odd number.
Yeah.
There's a lot there, and it might, I don't want to get into Johnny's lane or Tom Brady's lane, but it's probably a charter amendment, right? So then it's a vote of the public, and then all of the other kind of pressures for the city to put items on the ballot. Does this rise to the, and then it's really sensitive. Right?
Yeah.
So
It's
anyways,
a valid issue. Is Scott still here?
No, he
No.
left.
Okay. I wonder if he thinks the same way.
Well, he left.
Yeah. You snooze or you lose. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I had a question, but I wanted to make a quick comment before we did. I appreciate Board Member Brewster for bringing up that he did mention that comment at the committee meetings yesterday, and I would be remiss in saying that SDCERS staff indicated that they felt like the level of complexity that they were working with was easily handleable, so it wasn't a staff complaint there or concern. But I think around this time last year, the board had mentioned that about 10% of their budget went to the ADC payment. Am I remembering that correctly? And if that's the case, has that changed then? It sounds like your ADC has grown a little bit. Has the percentage of it changed as well? I don't know if you have that off the top of your head.
I don't. I do see, with it going up next year, our revenues are also increasing, so I'd have to recalculate that. I imagine it's pretty close to that.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay.
And if I may, just to be responsive to your second request about the outreach to employees, would it be possible to put on the agenda for our retreat to maybe brainstorm some things we can do for a little more outreach with the port?
We will put that on the wish list.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to clarify, we're going to hear from the actuary coming up here, and the port's ADC actually decreased for the coming payment.
Okay, well, thank you. We have our final presenter.
Yes, we do. Thank you very much, Matt and Tracy. Appreciate that. And now we would like to invite up the City of San Diego. With us today, we have Tyler Woods, Financial Operations Manager, and Christopher Purcell, Financial Operations Manager. We appreciate you being here and look forward to hearing your comments.
Good morning. Tyler Woods and Chris Purcell from the Department of Finance. Thank you all for having us here this morning. We're going to be walking you through the fiscal year 27 through 2031 five-year financial outlook for the city. And to provide some context real quick, the outlook is our long-range fiscal planning guide and serves as the framework for developing the upcoming annual budget for fiscal year 27. It focuses on baseline revenues and expenditures necessary to maintain the city's service levels as reflected in the last adopted budget for FY26. And this report was developed based on the best information we had available at the time in November at the release of the report. However, with all models, there's risk to the projections, including events that may occur during the outlook period whose outcomes are unpredictable or cannot be reasonably quantified at the time of the report. Just for a brief outline of what we'll be talking through, we'll be going through the baseline projections, so the major revenues and expenditures. We'll also be discussing briefly we consider beyond the baseline expenditures and revenues, potential mitigation actions, which will be represented in there. As you'll see, there are some shortfalls in the outlook. Additionally, some future fiscal considerations going on for the city and some general fund infrastructure needs. So as you can see up here, when developing the outlook, we begin with the baseline analysis, which is, again, our anticipated need to maintain those level of services that were adopted in the FY26 budget. As you can see in FY27, there's currently projected for the baseline to be an $88.8 million baseline shortfall, with shortfalls continuing through the outlook period. Before we move into the details of what's included in the baseline analysis, I just want to point out what isn't included here. So as I mentioned before, new and expanded facilities for libraries, parks, and fire, things that are going to come online that are going to have operating costs in the outlook period. We consider those above the baseline, as well as homelessness programs and services that are primarily funded with one-time grants. So you'll see beyond the baseline, we represent what the general fund would be. The general fund need would be beyond those one-time resources for those programs. And then we also don't include any of those potential mitigation action items. So key assumptions for the baseline, again, starts with the FY26 adopted budget, removes all of the one-time adjustments that were made in that budget, so one-time resources, one-time expenditures. Those are pulled out because they're no longer applicable to 27 in the out years, and there were significant one-time resources and expenditures included in the FY26 budget that were removed. We then apply growth rates to revenues and expenditures, including things that adjust due to inflationary measures like debt, fuel, water, energy, and IT costs. And then just to name a few really key assumptions here in the baseline, we did include a 2.94% salary increase as a placeholder for pending MOU negotiations each year in the outlook, a $4.9 million increase for the general fund share of the ADC as of our calculations based off last year's actuarial report, $6.7 million for a transfer to the Climate Equity Fund, and $32.2 million in Measure C revenue that's assumed to become available in FY27 and growing annually thereafter. So diving into the baseline revenue side of the analysis, baseline revenues are forecasted to be $28.1 million more in 27 than FY26, and that reason is twofold. On the major revenue side, the forecast is for those four revenue sources to increase by $41.5 million. That's primarily driven by property taxes, which makes up about $39.2 million of that. And then that is slightly offset by projected reductions in other revenues. For example, we're projecting an $8.1 million reduction in anticipated one-time reimbursements from Cal OES for the January 2024 winter storms. And there is a $3 million reduction assumed in here for parking meter revenues relative to what we were projecting at the FY26 Budget Act. It's probably worth noting that revenues really recovered rapidly after the pandemic, but we're projecting more moderate growth across all revenue categories. There was that spike. Now we're seeing that start to moderate post-pandemic, and we continue that moderate growth rate throughout the out years. For baseline expenditures, this is probably the biggest piece, about $116.9 million increase relative to the FY26 Budget Act. On the personnel expenditures side, we're projecting about $51.1 million. That's primarily due to a $36.2 million increase in salaries and wages for special salary adjustments, step increases, and drop payments, coupled with that 2.94% assumed placeholder for salary increases. And then on the non-personnel expenditure side, the significant reason for the increase is due to some increases in our debt service payments for our lease revenue bonds for that principal and interest, transfers to the Climate Equity Fund, and then several other things like energy, water, sewer charges, things like of that nature, and IT costs. So now moving to the portion that's again above what we consider to be the baseline. Up on this slide, you'll see new and expanded facilities. So again, these are library, park, and fire station facilities that are projected to come online in the outlook period that would have operating costs. So we look at that as additive to the baseline because it's reasonable to expect those operating costs will come to fruition. And then similarly for homelessness programs and services, as I mentioned before, what this slide is representing is what the general fund need would be should there not continue to be sources of one-time revenues or grants to continue funding operations for homelessness programs as of the FY26 budget. So when you put that baseline and those new expanded facilities and homelessness programs and services together, you can see in FY27 that grows the structural deficit from $88.8 million to $110.6 million. And likewise, you can see in the out years that structural deficit continues to exist in these projections. So with those shortfalls in mind, I thought it was important to talk about potential mitigation actions. So clearly with these shortfalls, ongoing budget reductions will be necessary to bring the budget into balance for FY27 to address that structural deficit. All of the general fund departments have been asked to prepare budget reduction proposals for consideration, as well as considering additional revenue generating activities. And those mitigation actions will be discussed throughout development of the FY27 budget process, beginning with the mayor proposing his budget on April 15th.
I have a question. So
Sure.
I know last year the mayor and the city council proposed a sales tax increase, and it didn't pass. And so I was curious, have you all thought about maybe a geo bond where the tax base will come from revenue, so it'll be a dedicated place where the revenue would go, so that might have a better chance of passing by the community versus a sales tax that could go to anything?
I think what I'd say candidly is we're very much kind of looking at all options right now. I don't think there's any settling of, we're taking all ideas,
No, I got it.
certainly.
I just know that that might be a better option, knowing if the voters know that the money's going to go directly to the infrastructure.
Understood.
But the problem would be that would take a 2/3 majority I mean, that just doesn't pass in San Diego, period. No, like it just never, ever passes.
You don't think there's a chance?
Not for the sales tax was the best opportunity. A citizens initiative with a sales tax or any kind of a revenue generating measure where it is the majority, that's possible, but that's been my experience. And I work on those measures.
No, I know.
Yeah.
I just thought if the voters might, I know from my perspective, because I do live in the city, that there is a general consensus that we have infrastructure needs. And potentially, maybe if there's a campaign around how to fund the infrastructure solely through a revenue stream, that they might consider it. But if you've done the research and know the answer.
No, I've heard rumblings of a sales tax proposed that might be restricted to certain infrastructure and other specific needs for that very reason. Will it come forward? But if the city brought that forward, you restrict that, it requires 2/3, and it's a waste of taxpayer money to put it on the ballot.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
All right. Moving to future fiscal considerations. So the outlook also discusses several other priorities that could significantly impact the city's general fund during the outlook period. There continues to be a maintenance backlog of general fund facilities. The city has climate action plan goals, including upgrading city facilities from natural gas to electricity and converting the city's fleet to electric vehicles. There continues to be the issue of the cost to service residents that were deemed ineligible for trash and recycling pickup. The general fund will need to pick up a portion of the costs of that grace period. And then, as always, continuing to build on the significant progress that's already been made in addressing employee compensation and working to make sure that job classifications are continually moved towards market median for wages. So that we can continue focusing on the ability to recruit, retain, and engage highly qualified employees. And then getting to the closing here, general fund infrastructure needs. So the outlook also discusses these infrastructure needs, including the goal for bettering our pavement condition, streetlight and sidewalk repairs that have backlogs due to underfunding, and a significant funding gap for needs in the stormwater department for their infrastructure. And then finally, the capital backlog for the general fund facilities themselves. All these things are in the billions of dollars and are priorities and need work. And these unfunded capital needs do obviously compete directly with the needs for baseline services. And I think in conclusion, just to put that all in context, that this once again is an outlook. It is a model and a forecast and a discussion about anticipations and expectations with the best knowledge at the time, and serves as kind of the table setting for budget discussions going into FY27. And as required by the city charter, the mayor will present a balanced budget by April 15th. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you for having us here and happy to answer any questions.
Can I just qualify that all of my comments are my personal views and not the views of the city attorney's office or the city? This is simply my personal opinion.
Absolutely.
This is, yeah, Brett was considering being a election consultant, and he's just withdrawn that. So the bottom line is the structural deficit is about 100 million, is that right?
Per year.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks.
Per year.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you.
Tyler, do you anticipate any difficulties in making future ADC payments?
No, not at this time.
Any other comments? Greg?
No, I just would like to thank you very, very much for joining us today. And we really appreciate your candid comments and hope to see you next year. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to all the plan sponsors for coming today.
Good luck.
So I'd like to take a 5-minute break.
Yeah.
Thank
So,
you.
Lisa Marie,
Yes.
it may take a little bit longer. We're having a little bit of a difficulty with our information system, so we need to reset the system and relog
Oh, okay.
everybody in.
So
So
about 10 minutes, 15?
let's just try 10:10.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, just in time, Bobby, for the break. Okay, everybody, we're going to get started. There's still some system issues, but this item before us is not an action item. So, and Jean has a time constraint, so we want to go ahead and proceed. And we'll probably have to have another break to see if the system can get fixed during the next break. But let's go ahead and move forward on our actuarial presentation. Greg, did you want to make any opening comments?
Yes, thank you. Before us today is an information item to talk about the June 30th, 2025 actuarial valuation. And we are very fortunate to have with us here our independent actuarial experts from Chiron, Jean Kalwarski and Alice Alsberg. And so with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. And just for board information, this is my 20th anniversary of presenting to this board. So, as usual, we'll cover several different issues, the background, the history, and then we'll dig into the valuation results, and we conclude with our projections, then answer any questions you may have. So this is the timeline we've always been on. Today we're presenting this June 30th, 2025 valuation, and here we are in January with the first draft of the presentation, giving the board 2 months to consider our report, and then in March we always come in and finalize the results, and then the city, this was true for all 20 years, makes that payment on July 1st. As you all may know, there's many different tiers for the city, not as many for the port and airport, but you can see what's significant here is the fact that the black is the tier 2 for the city, and you can see the reopening of it at the bottom there. And during that gray period is when the system was closed. So here's a history of your assets and liabilities, and your current funded ratio. The ratios are shown at the top. The bars are your liabilities. The 2 lines are your 2 measures of assets, market value of assets and our smooth value. And the ratios on the top are based on the smooth value. And you see it's just over 76% funded, which is the highest funded ratio in the last since 2008, I believe. And but back then, the discount rate was 8%, and now it's 6.5%, and we got stronger mortality assumptions. On a market value basis, the system is 78% funded. Here's a history of the actually determined contributions in the blue bars, and in the gold bars, what the city pays, and you can see each and every year the city has paid at least the ADC. In some years, there was excess payments. I remember years ago there was a tobacco settlement payment, and more recently, 4 or 5 years ago, there's a slight increase due to Proposition B funding. This is a history of your gains and losses. The gold bars are investments. Numbers above the 0 line is a gain, below is a loss. You see the dramatic Great Recession investment loss and the dot-com there in 2000, 2001. I think what's significant here is the city had, for a number of years, 2013 to 18, a salary freeze, but then salaries fell behind with the cities that the city competes with and attract employees. So there have been extra salary increases above and beyond our assumption many of the past 7 years, in particular the last 3 years. So a board member many years ago wanted us to introduce this chart, which is, what's caused the unfunded liability to change. And by the way, you'll see in a moment, the unfunded liability actually decreased this year. But the key drivers of the increase in the unfunded liability is that dark blue, and I guess it's sort of a light purple color. those are your, no, I'm sorry, not the dark blue. The teal and the purple, the top two slivers, those are your assumption changes, investments and demographic. And then the liability experience is a major contributor of the increase. And that's in the dark blue, but then the contributions made in the gold. So this puts together, since 2009, what's caused the unfunded liability to change. I'll turn to Alice.
Great, and I'll go ahead and step through similar history for the port and the airport. So starting with the funded ratio and the actual liability and the assets, we see that the plan is clearly growing in liability, more members, more benefits. As the plan matures, the liability is increasing, the assets are increasing. In 2025, that funded ratio is sitting at a higher rate compared to the prior year at 79.2%. The contributions over this same period have also increased over time, which corresponds to the liabilities increasing. When those benefits are being earned, then the contributions, specifically that normal cost, the rate of accrual for those benefits, is increasing over time. And the port has paid its contribution each year as determined by the actual contribution from the valuation reports. In terms of liability gains and losses, we see a similar pattern on the liability side. On the investments, it's the same pattern that we see on the city. We see for the port investments with that large investment loss in 2009. The liability experience has been somewhat different since the salary increases did not follow the same salary increase MOU negotiations that the city had. And we see in the most recent valuation year that the liability loss came in at about 1% of the total liability. And that was largely driven by deviations from the assumptions, with salary being a leading cause, and also the fact that the port is now reopened. It no longer has that tunnel for the members who were not participants for 5 years prior to entering the system. In terms of the port's unfunded actuarial liability since 2009, that UAL has increased by $141 million by similar factors that the city experienced. So there's the assumption changes, both economic and demographic, and liability experience that have increased the UAL over that period of time. The airport, we see a higher funded ratio, and that is due to the airport's internal funding policy of reaching that 90% and then achieving the 95 and higher. And we'll see on the next slide that the contributions coming into the system for the airport have exceeded the actuarially determined contribution in order to achieve that higher funded ratio. And so those contributions have built up the assets in order to reach where they are now at 96% funded.
Alice, did you say that their goal is 95?
Their policy has two benchmarks. It has a 90% benchmark and a 95% funded ratio benchmark. So whenever they fall below 90, they make an additional contribution to get themselves to 90. When they're between 90 and 95, they pay 1% of the liability in order to take their way up to 95. With additional contributions. And then once they hit that 95% funded ratio, it's my understanding that they'll pay the ADC and not this scheduled additional contribution.
Which is what happened last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And in terms of the investment loss, the gold bars, same pattern as for the port and the city that we see here for the airport. And the liability experience is somewhat varied. And since the airport has a smaller liability base, when there are fluctuations in experience, you'll see that blue line, that liability experience bounce around. across the period that's shown. And interestingly, and this obviously actuarially caught our eye, that this year, the liability experience for the airport came in as a 0%. It was almost as expected, which actuarially we like to see that, even though it's very rare. You always expect gains or losses for a net.
I always say that our projections are never right.
Yeah. So here we go. Net liability experience came in at 0% this year for the airport. And the UAL for the airport sitting at a 14.6 million increase since 2009. The two big factors, same as the city, same as the port, we have those assumption changes. And those assumption changes really firm up the value of the liabilities in order to capture the correct UAL and compare it to the benefits. Turning it over to Jean.
So now we get to the current valuation results. As you'll see soon, projected salary increases that have been negotiated, which were in excess of our 3.25% assumption, has contributed to some liability losses. And there you see the amounts of the salary increases. And there's a small impact here of Proposition B for the police tier conversion from Tier 5 to Tier 4. That's kind of minor. I think you'll see the numbers in some subsequent slide. So here are the results. In the dark blue area, we've got membership data. In the gray area, asset and liability data. And in the gold area, contribution details. And I think the big thing to notice in the blue area really is the total payroll increasing by 10.6%, with average salaries by 7.4%. I think the other numbers are kind of as expected in that area. The actual liability, moving on to the gray area, increased by 5%, but both asset value, the smooth and the market value, increased by more than that, which contributed to the decrease in the unfunded liability. And then you've got the funded ratios, which I described earlier, 76.1 for the smooth and 78 for the market. And then finally, in the gold area, the contributions, the bottom line, the total ADC increased by 5.6%. And the next slide will tell you the causes of those changes. So starting with the liability side, we expected liabilities to increase, but they increased by $187 million more than we expected. Over $140 million of that is due to the salary increases in excess of our 3.25% assumption. Then you see the change in Prop B, but that $5.2 million, but that's directly offset. No, that's not. I'm sorry. The miscellaneous changes, 9.1, are directly offset in the assets, but the Prop B is an additional $5.2 million. On the asset side, we expected assets to increase by 625.9. There was a gain of 89.2 million. And finally, the impact of the UAL. We expected the UAL to drop by more than what it did, the 131. But then you got, in addition, got the asset gain, but then you got the liability loss. And so the total change in the UAL was only 27.9. And then you see the components of the ADC, which changed by 30.1 million. That was the 5.6% that I quoted earlier.
Moving on to the port. So when the port presented earlier today, it was mentioned, and I mentioned it earlier, and I'll point this out because it comes into play when we look at the ADC change. But there was a period of time between January 2009 and 2024 where a member who was employed by the port had to work for 5 years before they were part of the system. And so they were in this tunnel. And so with this valuation, since that tunnel ended September 2024, with this valuation, we first saw an influx of actives because anyone who was in that tunnel is now part of the system. And the very first line of the membership table shown here, we see a 30% increase in the active count. And that 30% increase, we're going from 428 actives to 559 actives. So as far as the scale goes, there's about 100 of them who came from that the tunnel. And I'd like us to move from that top row of actives. So when we see that active change of a 30% increase in that active count, actives are earning benefits, and those benefits are covered by the members' contributions and employer normal cost. So down in the ADC section, in the gold section where we see the breakdown of contribution, the employer normal cost increased by 14%. That's driven by that big increase in the active population. In terms of the gray section there, the assets and liabilities, so the assets on a market value, those were presented to you from your investment consultant earlier this year. Assets on a market value came in at just over 9%. On an actuarial value, assets returned around 7.5%. So with that gain in the assets, offset by the liability increase, there's actually a decrease in the unfunded actuarial liability this year of 2.1%. And that funded ratio on an actuarial basis increased from 78% to 79.2%. And the remaining components of the contribution there, that ADC, we see that UAL payment decreased by 12%. And this is from the amortization pattern where we have all of the different bases that are tracked year over year. One of the large original 2009 bases, one of the layers that was a $1.1 million payment was finished. And so that's why we see that decrease from the 15.4 to the 13.1 in that change year over year. Taking a look at the experience, the actuarial liability experience. So the liability sat at $757 million for the year, the expected change, $18.9 million, but there was a small liability experience loss of $7.3 million. In that liability experience loss, that's where we see those new entrants who appeared from the tunnel because they were granted that entrance into SDCERS, so they came with a little bit, just under $2 million of liability. In addition to going forward, they'll continue accruing their benefits. So on the liability side, we saw the increase of $26.5 million. On the assets, we see an increase in the assets of $29.9 million. So there was that increase in above expected due to the returns coming in higher than the 6.5% discount rate. So in terms of the ADC, moving all the way to the right column, last year's contribution sat at $22.8 million. With the expected change decreasing, that positive asset experience and the small liability experience loss, that total ADC is decreased to $21.9 million for fiscal year 27. The airport, we've already mentioned this, sits strong with that internal funding policy to hit that 95% benchmark, and we see that is working for them when we take a look at their results for their valuation year. And the airport, I would like to mention what the airport mentioned when they were here, is that a portion of their new entrants, the new employees to the airport, they have a choice of going into the DC plan or coming into SDCERS. And so we see here in the very first row, the membership, what's happening with that active membership. We expect a steady membership year over year, but there was actually a decrease because we are seeing some of those members move into the DC, elect to go into the DC plan. And I believe he said, was it 36% elect the DC plan? So we're in turn seeing a decrease in that active membership from 24 to 2025. The middle section there, when we look at the assets and liabilities in the gray, the number that stands out the most is that unfunded actuarial liability going from $19 million to $13 million. And that was helped by that additional contribution that the airport is making and to pay off that unfunded actual liability. So down below, the components of change for the ADC, the employer normal cost went down, and that's driven by the lower active count. The UAL payment, this one is interesting, going down by 32%. The airport is in a position that the sum of all of those amortization bases is less than the interest on the unfunded actuarial liability. And since your amortization policy has a minimum interest payment, that interest on the UAL went down from 1.1 million to the 0.789 million. As far as the components of change, I'd like to point out that liability experience right there, 15,000. That was a fun one to see in our work and really dive into it and understand the components of some gains, some losses that ended up coming into a $15,000 liability experience loss. On the asset side, the assets performed greater than expected. We see a asset experience gain. And in all, on the ADC, so the actuarially determined contribution for the year was expected to decrease by 29,000. That asset experience gain decreased it by 185,000. And interestingly, the liability experience booked a small loss, but the ADC decreased from liability, and that's because the normal cost, so that payment from the active membership decreasing, is actually decreased slightly. So in all, the actually determined contribution for the airport decreased by 371 million to 5.767 million for the 2027 fiscal year.
So I take back what I said earlier, Chris. We weren't exactly right. We were off by 15,000.
All right, back to Gene.
So we're now looking at the projections, and you see in the top graph, the bars represent the liabilities, and you see the asset lines. And the plan is expected to become fully funded by,
2041.
but that isn't going to happen, which as I say all the time. And the bottom chart is interesting. You see the gold bars and the red line, that's the baseline employer contributions. There's a kind of a significant drop. What is it, 45 million?
45 million.
In a couple of years, and that's due to an old base of 2007.
The 2007 initial UAL payoff.
Drop. And so
the 20 years.
What's interesting is that if you go to the next chart, we programmed a minus, no, that's a positive 16%. And because the UAL payments can't be less than the prior years until the plan's fully funded, that's why the gold bars stay equal to the red line, which is the baseline projection. But then after it's fully funded, there's a dramatic drop in the employer contribution. But then we did a great year followed by a poor year, and that's minus 3.5%. And even though the gold bars are above that red line there, for many, many years, in fact, almost a decade, they're still less than next year's payment with an up and down year. And, you know, as usual, we could run many different scenarios if the board would like. And I think there might have been a request one year to put this online. Do you recall that? Is that still there? Okay. We will work on that shortly. Alice?
All right, and projections for the port, these are, we see a very stable gold contribution at the bottom there, and that is held because of that UAL payment floor that was established in 2018. So until the unfunded actuarial liability is paid off, that minimum payment on the UAL will be 13.3 million. So the normal cost plus expected administrative expenses and that 13.3 million UAL payment floor, hold those contributions steady through fiscal year ending 2043 before they're expected to drop down. The airport, being 96% funded right now, has a different outlook in terms of the airport's contributions compared to the member contributions. We see that the airport contributions are very close to the total member contribution, and in the out years, the airport's contribution is very close to the member contribution, because the majority of payment contributions coming in that far down the road will be from normal cost, and the airport members, all of the new employees are in the PEPRA tier, and the PEPRA tier requires a 50-50 cost sharing. So we see that 50-50 cost share plays out once the unfunded is paid off.
So that concludes our presentation, but I want to bring up a couple of items. The next time you'll see us will be in March, and I doubt there'll be any changes unless the board member brings up some questions. But we're also, around that time, going to begin an experience study. And the experience study is going to be conducted throughout the summer, and we plan to come back in September with the results. I can tell you right now, we don't anticipate any change to the economic assumptions, inflation or investments. The data will tell us what to do when it comes to retirements and turnover and the like, so we can't really anticipate what's going on there. And with the salary experience, I think we've been told that the city has caught up and they don't expect, in fact, I heard this morning city representatives say that their assumption in their planning is 2.95, but that's not necessarily what the unions will be able to get in bargaining, right? So I think it may be pretty much a vanilla matter. But one other thing that will be part of the experience study is the interest rate on drop accounts and the drop annuity rate. When we first came on board, it was equal to the discount rate, and which was 8% back then. And it really greatly encouraged people to enter into drop, because what they could earn on their money was 1 or maybe 1% at most at the time. So we then tied it to the CD rates. And also back then, there was a pension crisis going on too, and we were looking ways to shore up the funding of the system. So that'll be part of our study. Did I miss anything?
I think that covers the economic demographic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that concludes our presentation.
Okay, well, thank you, Jean and Alice. Are there any questions?
Yes, please. Gene, first of all, on the 2041 projection and whether you're going to be right or wrong about it, I don't think any of us are going to be around at that time, so I don't think you have to worry about being held accountable. But I'll assume that it's correct. Well, Alice will probably be here. I don't know. We'll see.
I can provide each of you with your life expectancy if you'd like.
Yeah. No, I don't want to look at that chart. But I do have a question, and I wish Ted was here. I had a chance to read the draft annual consolidated financial report. Took me about 3 weeks, and I think I digested it reasonably well. But I noticed that on one of the pages there was an exercise in discussing the investment return assumptions. I'm assuming you've looked at this, or this came from you or whatever. But what it really struck me that what it said is that at an investment return assumption of 6.5%, that the city's net pension liability is about $3 billion, give or take. And that if the investment assumption went to 7.5%, the city's net pension liability would go down to about $1.5 billion. It'd go down by 50%, essentially. And our past experience over the past whatever number of years since we went down to 6.5% has been in the 7.25% range or something along those lines. I mean, there's obviously specific metrics there. What I'm wondering is, since we're not in sync at the moment, it could prove that the 6.5 is good over the future. But what happens if our investment return assumption goes up, ticks up to 6.75 or 7% or something along those lines? Does that mean that the city's annual contribution goes down by a substantial amount? What happens?
Yes, liabilities decrease and contributions will decrease.
Okay. And then in theory, the 2041 becomes 2035 or, whatever, something sooner, right? And you talk quite a bit to us about generational equity, is that right? Intergenerational equity. So if our assumed investment returns now are unduly conservative, then that means this generation essentially overpays, right?
Well, you've got to consider all the assumptions, not just the investment assumption.
Okay.
For example, the salary increases have been greater than expected, so that would dig into that.
Sure. No, and I'm just talking about the investment return assumption. So.
But I mean, the intergenerational equity relates to all the assumptions.
Okay. No, fair enough. Fair enough. But in terms of that investment return, so it's a kind of a difficult situation where we have our general investment consultant looking back at what's happened in the past and then looking to the future and telling us that they expect returns of about 7.45% per year over the next 20 years.
Is that what they have?
Yeah,
presented?
that's the last projection that Aon gave us. And then we're sitting almost at 1% under that. And this obviously has real world impacts on the city's budget and all the rest of it. And I'm sure you want to get it right. We want to get it right, and where should we be?
Well, we'll certainly look at what Aon's expectations are. I haven't seen those firsthand. Was that something they presented yesterday?
In September, I believe that was in their report.
And when we come back, we will present not only their expectations, but the expectations of the entire industry. And as far as factors that we consider in changing the investment assumption, historical returns is the least important. The most important is future expectations and board preference, really, for risk appetite. But it took a long time for discount rates to drop from 8 to where they currently are for not just this plan, but all plans in the nation. And I think this year is the first year I'm beginning to hear some trustees like yourself talk about moving the other direction. I think you've heard me say before, we don't chase the returns each year. It's a slow process, but we'll certainly look at that.
Yeah, thanks. And look, it's who is it? Yogi Berra, who said it's hard to predict things, especially about the future. Back when the board, back in the 1990s, this board returns were going crazy, and a prior iteration of this board wanted the discount rate to be above 8%. They were saying, oh, well, it could be 8.5%. Look at what our returns are. Yeah. And that would have been a disaster, right? So, but sometime in the mid-2000s or whenever, the board looked and said, hey, we think the future is going to be much more bleak, and goes down to 6.5%. And I'm sure they had all kinds of good reasons for that, but again, they were predicting the future, and it didn't turn out that way. So, yeah, anyway, thank you.
Okay.
Any other comments?
Yeah, one comment, and just, for public forum, just to make sure I say this right, that the definition of a discount rate isn't the forecasted rate of returns, but it includes that amongst other things. So, does that sound right? The discount rate isn't the forecasted investing returns. It includes that plus other assumptions.
It is, when we do our projections, it is what we're projecting the investment returns to be going forward. Mm-hmm. But when you say it's not equal to the expected future returns, that depends upon whose expectations, Aon's, ours, the industry. So it could be different.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, so thank you, Jean and Alice, for coming, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. So we'll see you again in March.
In March.
And then again
and
in
September
the fall.
as well.
September. Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. 20 years, Gene. Can I have my certificate?
So our final information item this morning is a brief training for the board on filing our Form 700 with the state of California, and Melanie will give that training.
Pardon me as I take off one hat, go to the next hat. So, as Madam Chair, as you said, this is a very brief training about California Senate Bill 852 that we've all mentioned previously in the past. So you're all Form 700 filers. You've in the past been filing with the City of San Diego Clerk's Office. This new bill only is going to change who and where you file. So you're going to be changing from the City Clerk's Office to the FPPC, the Fair Political Practices Commission website with the state. Hopefully, everyone has received an email from the FPPC inviting you to create a new account. Please do that. Save that information. Nothing else is going to change. So the city clerk's office is actually going to be able to pull your filing from the FPPC's website, and they will have it and be able to share it with us as well. So nothing else is going to change. So if any of you have not received that email, please talk to Johnny and myself offline, and we can work with you in the FPPC to make sure that that's all taken care of. Save that information. Everything else should be the same. So now we're in January of the new filing year. The deadline will be April 1st of 2026. So the same notices will probably start coming from the FPPC saying, get ready to do your filings. Nothing else should change. But if you guys have any questions at all, obviously, let Johnny and myself know. This is what the new FPPC website looks like. When you log in, if you've already got your accounts ready to go, you're all set. That's it.
All right. Thank you, Melanie.
Melanie, is the form the same?
It should be exactly the same. Everything else will look exactly the same. The same items that you report,
Requirements
everything.
for reporting are all the same?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And Melanie, I understand that working for the city, there's a consolidated form as well that lets us file once for both entities?
And it's my understanding that will remain the same.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Melanie, I went through this on the 2nd of January, so I've already filed it.
You win.
But just a question is, it was a little harder to find definitions and requirements on that site versus the city for reasons I don't know. But just a clarification on stock ownership. The rule is that if it's an individual stock, it needs to be reported. If it's in a mutual fund or whatever, it does not. Is that right?
That is my understanding.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you all.
So moving to Section 6, the Audit Committee. Audit Committee Chair Lana Rancheco is unable to be with us today, and she asked if I would provide the board with a report on the committee's November 21st meeting. And the committee's agenda included two very important information items related to SDCERS financial statement audit. The first informational item was a review of the draft annual ACFR as of June 30, 2025. The review of the draft ACFR was led by our Finance Director, Ted La Selva, and he provided an overview of the draft financial report, and the committee found the draft report comprehensive and accepted the report without revision. Subsequent to the meeting, the external auditors provided an unqualified opinion on the financial statement, and the report was finalized, and that's the highest opinion you can receive. The final report is included in your board materials. The second information item was specific to the financial statement audit performed by the independent audit firm Macias, Gini & O'Connell. So Craig Harner, a partner with Macias, Gini & O'Connell, reviewed the draft communications associated with performing the financial statement audit. And in summary, the external audit firm found SD financial internal controls in good order, and the audit financial statements fairly presented, and the management operating with integrity. While the financial statement audit is a minimum requirement, is a testament to SDCERS' commitment to our transparency value that we create the ACFR report around the financial statements to improve access to information regarding SDCERS' financial condition. We are in the process of rescheduling our next audit committee meeting, which we anticipate will be on March 4th at 9 a.m. So this concludes the Audit Committee report. Greg, did you have any comments about the Audit Committee?
No, other than say thank you very much for doing the audit committee report out.
Okay,
Thank you.
great, thank you. So we'll move now to Section 7, the Disability Committee report, and I'll turn it over to our chair, Paul Lutz.
Thank you, Lisa Marie. The Disability Committee met yesterday and unanimously approved the consent items 1 through 4 and item 6 as recommended by staff. For item 5, the committee is recommending the board grant Mr. Ruiz an industrial disability retirement. I will be discussing all 6 consent agenda items. Are there any questions before I begin, or are there any requests to pull an item for a separate vote? Okay, hearing none. Starting with consent agenda items 1 through 3, approve the industrial disability retirement applications for, and I will do my best to say their names right, Kevin Bellin, Harvey Brown, Brandy Sorbet. These 3 applications for industrial disability retirement were unanimously approved by the committee, and as they are for the same type of benefit, the following applies to each application. The committee approved these members' application for industrial disability retirement, as each application was supported by evidence of being permanently disabled, being attributable to work duties, and causing the need for leaving employment. Are there any questions from the board on items 1 through 3 before we move on to item 4? Okay, hearing none. Agenda item 4 is to approve a non-industrial disability retirement and refer to hearing the industrial disability retirement application for Jennifer Ramirez. The evidence for this application for industrial disability retirement has substantial disagreement between medical physicians on the matter of industrial causation, and as such, staff and the committee recommends sending the application to a hearing officer. Additionally, pursuant to the board rules, a member may apply for non-industrial disability retirement pending the outcome of the industrial disability application. The committee approved the member's application for non-industrial disability, as the application was supported by evidence of being permanently disabled and causing the need for leaving employment. Are there any questions from the board on consent item 4 before we move on to consent item 5? Okay. All right, consent agenda item 5 is a recommendation from the committee to approve an industrial disability retirement for Jorge Ruiz. On a split vote, 3-2, the committee approved the member's application for industrial disability retirement, as the application was supported by evidence of being permanently disabled and causing the need for leaving employment. Furthermore, there was significant discussion by the committee on whether the member's pre-employment injury was pre-existing condition or an industrial injury. While the staff had recommended this question be further explored in a hearing, the majority of the committee members found sufficient evidence the pre-employment injury was not a pre-existing condition, and injury suffered at work was, in fact, a work-related industrial disability or industrial injury. Are there any questions from the board on consent item 5 before we move to consent 6? Yes.
I don't have a question. Would it be appropriate to make a comment at this
Please, yeah.
time? Thank you. That was a very good summary. I will say a little nuance as part of that discussion was, from my vantage point anyway, kind of wondering if there was something with the process, because I did find that we do tend to question when we do move to refer to hearings, that sometimes we start to question the process. I know I do not have expertise in medical matters, and so I do feel a little bit uncomfortable just reading a report and being able to kind of go from that. So nothing specific on this particular case, but I would appreciate maybe in the future if we could take a look at and discuss process related to this, and if there's kind of like a concern with board members that maybe something in that process needs to be changed or strengthened, so that rather than have kind of a so that there would give better guidance. So just wanted to add that.
And that's a good point. I'm glad you remind us of that. Yesterday, the vote was 3-2, and the two who denied the vote, it wasn't so much as they were denying the industrial disability as they were wanting to continue with the process or go deeper into the process. So I put a note here to we'll have some more discussion on the actual process. So thank you.
Can I just make a comment? So Greg, what is the process for discussing and changing the process? Is it a committee action, or is it a
Yes.
board action? Okay.
Yes, and we'd like to come back and at the committee level have a discussion about roles and responsibilities with regards to hearings and how do we use hearings to help support the board in making their decisions. And it's changed over time, and there's no right or wrong answer. It's really what works best for the disability oversight governance structure that we have in place here.
Okay. So Paul.
And just to add to what Christiana was saying, I think part of the biggest challenge is what is meant by a pre-existing condition, and to what degree does it impact the later injury. It's really hard, and it's very. It would be really helpful to have more specifics on that, or for us to make some advanced decisions on those kinds of things.
Yes, and in this committee meeting, we had 3 good examples of the differences. We had 2 examples of where the employees, the members, had specific accidents at work, and then we had a member, the Ramirez case, where there's evidence of injury before and may possibly increased injury due to work. So that's the Ramirez where we are going into the hearing officer. So this will be good. Okay, and Mr. Ruiz and his wife are here, and they had prepared a public comment. As it looks right now, we will be moving to approve agenda items 1 through 6, but I don't want to, just continue forward without giving you the opportunity to read your statement if you'd like to still do so. And then we'll set up the timer. I don't necessarily know that we need to, since he was within time yesterday. Okay. Yeah, so Mr. Ruiz, whenever you're ready.
Good morning, board members, and thank you for hearing me. My name is Jorge Ruiz, and I am here to present one clear truth. My incapacity was substantially caused by my job as a firefighter. For more than 12 years, I lived and worked with a stable eye condition. I responded to fires, climbed ladders, carried victims, drove apparatus, cut roofs, advanced hose lines, all without restriction, without limitation, and without disability. Then, on January 12, 2024, inside a city fire station, using city equipment, performing Code 9 required fitness to maintain operational readiness, my retina detached. If I worked behind a desk, I would still have my vision. I would not have a shunt surgically implanted in my eye to regulate pressure, a device I will carry for life, with daily risk of infection and permanent restrictions. This did not happen over time. It did not happen by coincidence. It happened because of the job, not despite it. The board-appointed ophthalmologist confirmed the causation directly, and I quote, "With reasonable medical probability, his rigorous weightlifting regimen caused the detachment. Probable, not theoretical. Work caused, not accidental." I understand why SDCERS must evaluate pre-existing injury. The system must be protected from claims where injuries were inevitably going to happen regardless of employment. But the evidence draws a line that is impossible to ignore. My prior injury never disabled me for a single day of service. I never had a shunt, never had restrictions, never lost functional vision until job-required exertion took it from me. The 2012 injury at the age of 18 years old did not retire me. The job did. And the outcome of this board's decision matters deeply. The difference between industrial and non-industrial is not just paperwork. It is a difference between whether my family will face long-term financial hardship or not. Industrial means acknowledging that this injury happened in service and providing the support needed to replace the career that I lost. Non-industrial would place a burden on us, even though the work event is what changed my medical reality and ended my ability to serve. I wore this badge with pride. I trained hard because the community counted on me. This injury cost me more than my eyesight. It cost me identity, purpose, camaraderie, and financial stability. But what I have not lost is grit. My family and I will rebuild, we will move forward, and we will prevail. Today, I am only asking for closure, for recognition of causation, and for industrial disability retirement to be granted as supported by the medical evidence. Thank you for your time, your fairness, and your service to this process.
Mr. Ruiz and Mrs. Ruiz, thank you for showing up and appreciate your public comments.
So I have a question. So the staff recommendation is to approve non-industrial disability retirement and then refer to a hearing to achieve industrial disability?
So yesterday, the Disability Committee, that was the recommendation from staff. Yesterday, we voted on actually just going right to the approval of the industrial disability, and we voted 3-2 to approve industrial, so it will not need to go to the hearing officer, and he'll achieve the desired industrial disability today.
Okay, because that's not what's written here.
Let me read.
So just to let me clarify, is that you're correct. When we put out the agendas for both the committee and the board, it includes staff's recommendation to send it to hearing and approve in non-industrial. After significant discussion on this case at the committee level, the committee disagreed with staff's finding, set aside staff's finding, and said, based on the evidence, on a 3-2 vote, we believe that Mr. Ruiz is eligible for a industrial disability retirement.
Okay.
So that's what's before the board today.
Thank you for the clarification.
Sorry.
No, thank you. Yes, sorry, I didn't clarify that.
Lisa Marie, would it be easier if you did the consent agenda with 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 as is, pull 6, and then vote to approve the recommendation by the Disability Committee?
Clear.
Sounds good. Yeah. All right, well, then we'll move on to item 6, moving on to consent. Item 6, staff's recommendation to approve non-industrial disability retirement pending determination of the industrial disability retirement application of Joel Epstein. At our November meeting, the board approved returning Mr. Epstein's application and hearing officer report back to the Disability Committee so the committee could directly evaluate the medical evidence and read the hearing testimony prior to making a determination or recommendation to the board. Mr. Epstein has requested the board grant a non-industrial disability retirement pending the board's determination on his industrial disability retirement application, which was similar to Ruiz's yesterday. The non-industrial retirement benefit was unanimously approved by the committee as the application for non-industrial disability retirement was supported by evidence of being permanently disabled and causing the need for leaving employment. Are there any questions from the board on this item or any other item before I move to consent items 1 through 4 and 6 for a vote?
I'm still a little bit confused on what we're voting on.
So we'll vote on.
I guess I'm just confused, and I understand, Greg, what you're saying about things happening after the agenda. So are we voting for
For number,
is number 6, which is we're approving non-industrial disability for 4, 5, and 6, and then referring it to hearing, or?
So the motion before the board will be on consent items 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6.
Okay.
And 1 through 3.
As written on the agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And then 5, we're going to take up separately, and we'll explicitly state the recommendation from the committee to grant Mr. Ruiz the industrial disability, and we'll vote on that one separately.
Mm-hmm.
so it should read, board recommended to approve disability retirement application as opposed to non-industrial.
And it depends on which one we're talking, because in these 6 items, we have both non-industrial and industrial.
That's why
So-
you're confused. But yeah, the 2 industrial, 4 and
First-
6, they remain non-industrial. And 5 becomes just industrial disability.
Yes, 5
Take
becomes.
the non out.
Yeah, and I'm not looking at the same screen
And
as
it's
you,
hard
so that
because we
might be
don't-
some of the confusion. Yeah, so
That is the confusion.
items 1 through 3 were voted and approved, industrial. Yeah, 4 was a non-industrial going to the hearing.
Right.
And then 5 was Mr. Ruiz's, where we changed it up
Yeah,
yesterday.
we're approving industrial.
And 4 is still going to hearing.
That's correct. Yeah.
Well, based on our vote.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And
So
6 is still
how are we
going to hearing.
what are we
6 is still
doing
going
for
to
the
hearing.
IT voting? How is this going to work?
So I need a motion, and then I'm going to track the motion and call it out.
Okay, so
Okay,
I'll
so
make,
it's
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
I move to approve for the approval of Disability Committee consent agenda items 1 through 4 and 6.
And then I will need a hand vote, and then I will track that here.
Okay.
For all in favor, please raise your hands.
Okay.
And the motion passes 10-0.
Okay.
We need a chalkboard or something.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Now, one moment.
Number 5.
Okay, and then number 5. So number 5, I move to approve an industrial disability retirement for Mr. Ruiz. May I have a second?
So refer to hearing or approving?
To approve
approving the
industrial,
application.
yeah.
Don't need a second, but
Oh, okay, that's right.
Because it's from the committee.
This is the second time you've
from the
remind
committee.
me of that, that's right. So,
So Paul made the motion.
I'm making the motion, that we can please cast
Paul
your
votes
votes.
moves.
She's not quite ready yet. I don't think.
Once Melanie's ready, we can raise our hands to vote on this, I guess.
All right, please raise your hands to vote.
This is in favor?
This is in
In favor
favor of
to,
an industrial disability retirement for Mr. Ruiz. Let's see, who do we? Maggie? Your patience is appreciated. Just go this way. Okay.
you have to call it against and abstain.
Not even.
You may, Paul.
Thank you.
And we'll wait for Melanie to announce the results of the vote.
Sorry, Bobby, what was your vote?
She voted yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, there was 2
And noes, please raise your hand.
no's.
Noes, okay.
We didn't have any abstains, correct?
No abstains.
And no abstains, okay.
All right. With all votes in, the motion passes 8-2.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you,
All right.
Mr. Ruiz, and your wife for coming, and thank you for your service.
And I appreciate the patience of everybody and asking for a little clarification. We did move things around a little bit.
It was confusing.
Yeah, sure, it was. All right, this finishes the Disability Committee action items. So moving on to staff provided disability status report, and it is available in the board agenda package. The disability report provides an overview of the disability application review. Statistics highlighting the caseload is, as usual, in good shape, with a caseload of 19 applications, with all but one case within the 18-month processing window, which has been delayed due to the member's non-related health condition. Are there any questions or comments from the board members or staff? Don't see any. If none, I was about to read. Oh, well, it's about to read the Greg's comments on here. Anyways, I got carried away. Thank you all, and back to you, Lisa Marie.
I did have a question. I know Chris alluded to maybe we need to have better education about pre-existing condition, and I was curious, does there need to be any training or someone to come in and talk to us about that, or the committee as a part of this process review?
Yes, so at the committee level, both, we've done this both at the Disability and Business and Governance, that we do provide training on, you dive deeper down into a particular issue. And it does look like this would be a good educational session for the Disability Committee.
Okay, perfect. So there are experts that can come and provide that training on how to define it, pre-existing conditions?
We will look. That is, one of we have actually experts in the room with Sandra Clausen and Johnny Tran.
Okay.
And there are other experts, and actually Jamar, sorry, didn't mean to besmirch Jamar.
Okay.
But there's other folks actually that can corroborate that discussion.
Okay.
We can also look into bringing in medical doctors. But again, it really depends because those medical injuries could be, we could bring in 100 doctors because it would be all different types of ailments that could happen. So
I understand.
we'll talk to the committee about how they like to structure that and who we can bring in.
I mean, it might be interesting to have someone have this as a part of the retreat, because I'd like to hear the training.
Okay.
I don't know what the other board members, I think it.
We will put it on the wish list.
Okay, put on the wish list. Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah,
Paul, for your report.
Yeah, you're welcome. I was up in the SDCERS office yesterday and found a nice packet they had there in the lobby, giving an overview of the difference between non-industrial and industrial,
That'd be
which
helpful.
is board members from various backgrounds and
It's
age.
upstairs?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I'll hand you mine and I can go
Yeah,
grab
that'd be
another
great.
one. Yeah,
Thank you.
I think.
Okay, are you guys good, or you need a break? Are we good? Okay, she needs a break. We'll take a 5-minute break. And then we'll move to business and governance. Okay, we're going to reconvene. Okay, so we're going to move on to Section 8, Business and Governance Committee, and our Chair, Bobby Spoon, will provide that report.
All right. The Business and Governance Committee met yesterday to consider 3 action items, and the committee approved all 3. For item number 1, the committee unanimously recommended the board approve Mr. Ortinez's appeal. Please note this is different than what was listed on the meeting agenda. For item number 2, the committee unanimously recommending the board approve staff's recommendation. For item number 3, the committee is unanimously recommending approving staff's recommended changes to the charter, policies, and rules with further edits provided by Board Member Brewster, which we will discuss before we vote. Before I review the 3 action items and make a motion for the consent agenda approval of action items 1 through 3 as modified by the committee, are there any action items the board members would like pulled for a separate vote? Okay, hearing none. Starting with consent agenda item number 1, staff's recommendation to deny the appeal of Arsenio Ortinez. Would you like to say something, Chris?
Based on our conversation at the Disability Committee, how some committee members rightfully found it a little bit confusing that the agenda said one thing, but the committee was recommending a different action, maybe we could pull Mr. Ortinez, item number 1, for a separate vote, because the actual vote will be different from what is on the agenda.
Okay, moving to consent agenda item number 2. Staff's recommendation to select Golden Star Technology as the boardroom audio-video vendor for an amount not to exceed $250,000. And Michelle presented this. Michelle provided background and an explanation of the scope of services in this project. It is industry best practice to review and refresh the AV environment every 5 to 7 years. SDCERS' last board-approved refresh was 20 years ago in February 2006. This project will modernize the SDCERS boardroom audio-video infrastructure to ensure all systems operate on a consistent current bandwidth specifications. This will result in a more stable, reliable, and sustainable environment. The vendor recommended Golden Star Technology was selected through a competitive request for proposal. The cost of this project is not to exceed $250,000, which includes one-time cost of the project along with 5 years of support of the environment. The committee unanimously approved staff's recommendation and authorized the CEO to sign the contract with Gold Star for an amount not to exceed $250,000. Are there any questions or comments regarding this item? Greg?
Yep. I apologize, Bobby. I had a typo in your write-up,
Yes, you did.
which she eloquently rolled right over.
I thought that was all extemporaneous.
So we last did the board upgrade in 2016, which was 10 years ago. I mistakenly put 20 years ago, so thank you for
Oh, that's why I
covering.
thought it was 2006.
Thank you for covering for me.
All right. Moving to consent agenda item number 3, staff's recommendation to amend the Chief Executive Officer Charter, the appeal of staff decisions regarding the benefits policy, the conflicts of interest policy, Public Records Act policy, and Division 2 of the board rules contribution. Johnny explained amendments to the appeal of staff decisions regarding benefits policy, specifically staff's desire to explain to members the board's authority to grant any appeal is limited to the plan documents. The committee supported Board Member Brewster's proposed changes to explicitly state it is within the board's authority to determine how to apply its rules when considering a member's appeal. Johnny, could you please put Mr. Brewster's recommended policy edits on the presentation screen?
There you go.
Do you want to explain it?
Mr. Brewster's suggested changes? Absolutely. I think he wanted to be more directive as opposed to educational, and so the last two sentences are changed to note that it is the board that ultimately decides if it's within its purview to grant the requested appeal. How'd I do, Chris?
And what does staff think about that?
Staff supports Chris Brewster's recommendation.
All right.
Just one question on the language. So it starts out when a claimant, and then it talks about members. Can you just change it when a member disputes a staff decision? Because the claimant is the member, right? I got confused yesterday and I misspoke, and now I think I'm asking my question correctly.
I see you. So we defined claimant because it can be a person other than a member, like a spouse.
Okay.
So it would be inconsistent if we had used member in place of that. I know that we do use board member, and so maybe that is the issue with the reading in the red line suggested.
So if I can interject here, I apologize for interrupting. Yeah. So Brett, what we can do is if the board approves the general nature of this, we'll go in and wordsmith and make sure that there's continuity in terms.
Great. Thank you.
Yes.
Everybody good? I move approval of consent agenda items 2 and 3 as modified by the committee.
So I have Roberta Spoon making the motion. I would like to do a roll call this time to ensure that we have every vote captured. So please call out your vote when I call your name. Lisa Marie Harris. Yes. Michelle Bush. Brett Bartolotta. Yes. Chris Brewster.
Yes.
Christiana Gauger.
Yes.
Paul Kaufman.
Yes.
Paul Oates.
Yes.
Lou Maggi.
Yes.
Kent Morris.
Yes.
Roberta Spoon.
Yes.
With all votes in, the motion passes 10-0.
All right, moving back to the first one. Recommendation to deny the appeal of Arsenio ordinance. It was presented by Susan. After significant discussion on how SDCERS Board Rule 7.180, which determines the effective date of a disability retirement benefit, should be applicable to Mr. Ortinence's appeal, the committee decided unanimously to set aside the staff's recommendation to deny the appeal and to instead recommend the board grant Mr. Ortinence's request to make his disability effective date the same as his retirement date. Are there any questions? Hearing no questions, I move to approve item number 1, to deny the appeal, to approve the appeal.
I have Roberta Spoon moving to approve the appeal of Mr. Arsenio Ortinez. I will call out your name. Please let me know your vote. Lisa Marie Harris.
Yes.
Michelle Bush. Yes. Brett Bartolotta.
Yes.
Chris Brewster.
Yes.
Christiana Gauger.
Yes.
Paul Kaufman.
Yes.
Paul Oates.
Yes.
Lou Maggi.
Yes.
Kent Morris.
Yes.
Roberta Spoon.
Yes.
Thank you. And with all that, all votes in, the motion passes 10-0.
All right. After that, we heard reports from member services and from benefits administration and information technology. They were provided by staff, and included in our package were reports from legal, finance, and the compliance report, which was new. Thank you, Johnny, for that report. I thought it was very thorough, very nice. Are there any questions and comments? Hearing none?
Just one real quick, just so everyone knows, we're be careful of hot mic moments because the mics are just coming on automatically, like Lisa Marie, yours is on.
I turned mine on.
You did? Okay, because we didn't, and they
Oh,
just
okay.
came on, so.
I think they were automatically, they were turned on for us while we were casting our votes, so they could,
But they didn't get back on.
so, got you.
That's the issue.
So my hot mic moment is just to say, I just want to let you know that Member Services is working on a very robust system of electronically communicating with members that's not in place right now. And it's just an excellent initiative, and I'm very happy about that on behalf of the members. So thank you.
That's it for the B&G committee.
Okay, thank you, Bobby. So as our investment committee chair, I will be providing today's committee report. The investment committee met yesterday and discussed 4 action items and 3 information items. The first 3 action items deal with manager selection and termination, and therefore are delegated to the investment committee. So I'll just give a brief presentation. No additional vote is needed. So the first action item was to approve $25 million commitment to TPG Twin Brook Direct Funding for SDCERS private debt portfolio. TPG Twin Brook Direct Lending Fund is an evergreen fund focusing on senior loans into the lower middle market. The second item was to approve $35 million commitment to Clarion Partners, an alternative sectors fund for the real estate portfolio, and it is open-ended, a core plus fund focusing on investing in real estate sectors such as senior housing, industrial, and outdoor storage. And I thought they gave a really good presentation. Then the third item was the recommendation to terminate Artesian Partners non-U.S. small and mid-cap mandate. And essentially, this firm has been underperforming and have had not been very accessible to staff. And so this item was approved to terminate Artesian. So among those 3 action items, are there any comments from staff, further comments you'd like to make? No? Okay. All right, well, let's move on then there was one remaining action, which was an annual review of the proxy voting guidelines. Demetrius, did you want to say a few comments about that? Which we all will be voting on.
Sure, I'm happy to give a brief summary. Annually, staff meets and works with the proxy voting vendor to review SDCERS' guidelines and make any updates or changes if necessary in line with best governance practices. Last year was a bit of a different situation as SDCERS switched its proxy voting vendor and hired Institutional Shareholder Services, ISS. So as part of their onboarding process, we had them do a very thorough and holistic review of SDCERS' guidelines. And we asked them to opine on whether they thought the guidelines remained appropriate, if there was any updates they recommended, and if the document could be streamlined at all. They came back with a variety of relatively minor changes, and the nature of those changes are really not going to change the way that they vote on SDCERS' behalf. It's really just to condense and clarify the document. And all of those changes were highlighted in the red line version of the guidelines that are in your materials, and they are in line with best practices per ISS.
Thank you, Demetrius. And the committee did approve this item unanimously, and now it's up. I'll make the motion to approve it here. Are there any comments? Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to comment that essentially what's happening here is that, obviously we hold these various securities and so forth, and these public companies hold votes from time to time and decide what the composition of their board is going to be and so on. And in theory, this is our opportunity to express our opinion on how these companies ought to run. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And we're such a small minnow in the whole big picture that what that means is that by getting together with ISS and essentially allying with other like-minded entities, ISS is going to companies and basically saying, this broad group of people out there believes in these things. But I just want for clarity or transparency for everybody to understand there is a lot of different things in, bullets. And by the way, I really appreciate you narrowing it down because it went from 50 pages down to 49, which is excellent. Not really. But just to give you an example of one of the things that we will be standing for as a result of that, and we're talking about a corporate board we're investing in. The board is less than 30% gender diverse or has fewer than one director from an underrepresented community and has not provided sufficient rationale or a plan to address the lack of diversity on the board. So, I mean, this is how far down these kinds of things go, and it essentially says that ISS would not support this. So, I mean, if you break that down, one director from an underrepresented community totally wipes out any female representation, for example, or vice versa. It's just really interesting stuff when you get down in the weeds, and I'm not exactly sure that every one of these, if someone were to ask, do you guys really believe in that, if we would say yes.
Okay. Any other comments? So I made the motion for approval.
I have Lisa Marie Harris is making the motion. I will call out your name. Please let me know your vote. Make sure your microphones are on, or Ms. Blanca will turn them on for you. Lisa Marie Harris.
Yes.
Michelle Bush.
Yes.
Brett Bartolotta.
Yes.
Chris Brewster.
Yes.
Christiana Gauger.
Yes.
Paul Kaufman.
Yes.
Paul Lotz.
Yes.
Lou Maggi.
Yes.
Kent Morris.
Yes.
Roberta Spoon.
Yes.
Thank you. With all votes in, the motion passes 10-0.
Okay, thank you, Melanie. There was also 3 information items. One was an annual analysis of SDCERS public market fees, and there was good news here. Working with Aon and the staff, they were able to reduce the fees for the public market asset from 26 basis points to 32 basis points. And so we're in the first quartile for fees paid compared to a similar portfolio of public traded assets. And during the committee, we also discussed having staff come back to the board with with a general presentation of just fees in general. So we'll get more information in March. There was also a presentation on a total fund performance report for the quarter ended September 30, 2025. SDCERS total fund returned 4.4% net in quarter 3, 2025, slightly underperforming the benchmark of 4.8, but all asset classes in the portfolio resulted in positive absolute returns in the quarter. And lastly, the diversifying strategy update. At the September 2025 meeting, the board approved initiating searches for other kinds of diversifying strategies to add to the portfolio, and Aon provided their approach for how they're going to pursue that, and they'll be presenting that approach at the March meeting. In addition, there were 5 reports, and you can look those up in your packet. So that concludes the investment report, unless there's any further questions or comments? Nope. Okay, so now moving on to questions and comments from the president, trustee, and staff. Are there any questions or comments from the board about any of the educational reports? No? Greg, do you have any comments?
Yes, and I'll keep it brief. I just really wanted to reemphasize what Chris brought up on how excited I am about expanding our communication channels through our website and maybe using email blasts, and it's really exciting. So thank you, Natasha. Yesterday she even won the Chris Brewster Hero of the Day Award, which was very, very nice for her and her entire team, and lots of folks in the organization actually are part of that. Also wanted to mention that Natasha and her team are also redesigning our website to make it more member-centric. The way I look at it and the way it was designed was more as a training knowledge base, and it's not really user-friendly. So Natasha and our communications manager, Jessica Taylor, with a lot of great support from IT. I see Norma Frank back there, who's got experience in this area, are looking to revamp that. And so we're working with the firm to actually improve our member portal and our member website to make it more member-centric. Big news this time of year is retirees want to know, when am I going to get my tax forms? So Ted LaSalvia, who couldn't be with us today, but he's doing okay, he and his team are working with our vendors, and everything is on time and on target, and we're looking to get those hopefully put up on the member portals well in advance of the January 31st deadline. So I think about a week or so beforehand, it'll be available electronically, then they'll get mailed out. So 1099 tax reporting is doing well. We did have a operational challenge on retiree health care. As you know, we no longer are the primary level of support to the city on retiree health care. They now use Benefit Outsource Solutions, or BOSS. And there was a glitch in Medicare reimbursements for people that pay the non-standard rate. So about 220 people did not get their reimbursements for Medicare at the end of December. Our phones lit up, of course, heard from the stakeholder groups. So a lot of good communication, though, and BOSS will be rectifying that for those about 220 members through the end of January payroll. So things happen, and I was really glad to see BOSS step up and own it and fix it. So that was really good. And lastly, my daughter is getting married and outside of the country. And so I will be taking a considerable amount of time between board meetings. So following the end of January through the end of February, I will be out traveling and dancing at weddings and things like that nature. And I'm very pleased to say Johnny Tran will be the acting CEO in my stead. I have a list of CEO duties that I've delegated to my team. So some of you that are committee chairs will be meeting with your regular people, and some of you will be meeting with new people. So, but we'll make sure the organization's up and running, and making sure that we get the budget done and the actuarial evaluations here before you in March, and all those good things are going to happen behind the scenes. So,
Greg, when
thank
are
you,
you out?
team.
What are the dates you're out?
You're going to miss me January 26th through February 27th.
Do you call them that often that you need to know?
Curious.
Greg, I have a question real quick. I'm going back a little bit in the modernization and use of technology for member services. Are there AI considerations or tools that you've embedded into some of that
yes.
modernization?
That's really exciting.
Okay.
As I've mentioned before, I've always wanted to try to find more off-the-shelf products than develop them ourselves. And it's really exciting now, as you go to conferences and you talk to peers, there are more and more products available that are already developed that are plug and play. The other thing that we look at, and we get a lot of mentoring from our Chief Information Officer, Michelle, is that you have to be very careful of your data. And so while some of the big AI providers want you to offload your entire data set into the cloud, we're like, we are not doing that. So we're finding tools that we can use locally to use our data within our protected confines. And one of the things we're looking at, Natasha and her team have been a good starting source of looking at as using our data information sets for training, and also using it in our call center so that those AI tools can actually listen to the phone call, summarize the phone call, and provide it to the member service representative so they can review the summary to make sure that it lists everything that's important, and to make sure that AI has summarized it correctly. But just we're starting to move in that direction. Yeah. We're also working on a more robust artificial intelligence policy to help guide staff on what they can and cannot do in looking at risks. We currently have one through the city of San Diego, but we're developing one that's more in-depth to SDCERS and how we can implement these tools and keep everybody safe.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to make a suggestion, maybe to get something across the line. We've been discussing for about 2.5 years the need for succession planning, and that's come up at a number of different meetings, and somehow, and I talked to Michelle about this just the other day, we haven't been able to get it sorted. And I'm wondering, since Colin's not in the room, if we could see if we can get some advice from her to the committee it's you, Lou, me, wasn't it Louis who was, and he's not around anymore, but the goal would be to come back in March. Go ahead.
I think Greg has response to that.
Yeah. No, and I, the CEO succession planning committee, head up by Michelle, has been checking in with me, saying, Greg, we met back in August, and we need to meet again. At our August meeting, we put together a preliminary timeline on the executive search, the different tasks at hand, which included a emergency CEO succession plan. Colin and her team, our HR director and her team, have gone out and got some sample policies from other organizations that we just need to get before the committee. We're going to draft one up. We're about 2.5 years out on the succession planning for the CEO. So beginning in the spring is really when we start gearing up. We've already drafted up the objectives and what do we try the kind of the job duty. We have a draft of that. We also have skills and objectives for the CEO. So we have a lot of the basics down, but now we need to finalize the search and the materials, and we'll get that before the committee.
Yeah,
So I think, Chris,
sorry,
it's,
go ahead.
in talking with Greg, it's kind of a two-step process in that there is an emergency succession plan that's being developed as well as the longer-term plan. So obviously, we want to take care of the emergency plan first and get that locked down and then continue with the conversation about the longer, more replacement of the CEO plan.
Yeah, and that seems like good prioritization, and I guess, Greg, be careful in Thailand. Because we don't have an emergency succession plan right now.
Okay.
But we have Johnny, so.
Yes. Any further comments, Greg?
No, thank you.
Okay, so moving to section 11, closed session. Johnny, do we have any closed session items?
We do. We're going to talk about the existing litigation, initiation litigation, and exposure, about 15 minutes. this
Okay,
morning.
so the board will go into closed session, and staff, consultants, and visitors, please vacate the room. And we'll move into closed session right away. But if you all want to take a break and get something to eat.
They don't vote in your group?
Well, they do, but it's like, it's such a
Proportionately.
tiny number of people compared to the city retirees. It's like,
Okay, Johnny, do we have a closed session report?
Yes, there's nothing to report. Thank you, Lisa Marie.
Okay, so that concludes the meeting, and the meeting is adjourned. We'll meet again next on March 13th, and we'll see you then.